now. And I will go live to Facebook, and then I'll meet you all in a second, and then we'll begin. So we start at 5 past. 5 past if you're on the East Coast. I'm in Australia, so it's 5 past 7 here, a.m.
Australia.
Yeah, Melbourne. So I always feel like breakfast. All right, here we go, live on Facebook. That should pick itself up. Excellent. And then I'll mute all of you. But as I said, you can all unmute yourselves when you need to. And Mark, I'm handing over to you to begin the show.
Well, thanks, Cassandra. Well, we're delighted today to welcome a celebration of David Shapiro's work. Unfortunately, David himself was taken ill. He's currently in the hospital. We wish him well. But Brenda Coultas, Joanna Fuhrman, Mark Statman, and Kate Farrell are all delighted to celebrate David's work and also read some of their own. But before we get started with the feature today, let me introduce my co-host, Cassandra Atherton, who's an award-winning prose poet and international expert on prose poetry. Her prose poetry is widely anthologized and has been translated into Japanese, Chinese, and Korean. Cassandra has published more than 30 books and is currently writing an illustrated book of prose poetry on the Hiroshima Maidens with funding from the Australia Council and the Victorian government. Cassandra also co-wrote Prose Poetry, an introduction, and co-edited the anthology Australian Prose Poetry. She's also commissioning editor for the Westerly magazine and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia.
Thank you so much. And yeah, my current scholarly project is a book for Princeton on ekphrastic poetry. So I've been asking people to hit me up with their ekphrastic poetry. I'll put my email address in the chat when I'm finished reading. But surprisingly, or not, I'm going to read a prose poem. And I was asked to do a series of prose poetry based on Japan while I was also living in Japan for a while. So here we go. At 5 a.m., the sky wraps the bottom of our king-size bed in a thick lavender stripe. Your hand is resting on your cheek, fingers fluttering against your eyebrow as the light from Docomo Tower tints your pillow lemon and lilac. I have grown into a deep silence and into the cramped voicelessness of morning. Time presses, but I'm the only one who feels its weight. I smooth out crinkles in the bottom sheet with the balls of my feet, and you turn toward me. Too early to rise, too late to dream. You fill the space between my arms and thighs in a tight enfolding of skin and bone. Later, we wait for the sound of the trains, imagine their colored stripes snaking through the mazes beneath us. Just above the tip of my toe, Mount Fuji is a tiny white triangle. And I have the pleasure of introducing Mark Vincennes. So for the regulars, join along. Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss-American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He's published over 40 books of poetry, translations, and fiction, including more recently, The Pearl Diver of Irunmani, The King of Prussia is Drunk on Stars, The Mayfly Codex, 3 Telltale Love Signs, Thieves' Canto, The Visitation, a novelette from Sir Vision Island, and forthcoming, Spells for the Wicked, Unlikely Books, and No More Animal Poems with White Pine Press. And you can catch him at the New Orleans Poetry Festival next week. Mark is also a prolific translator, and he has translated from German, Romanian, and French. He has published 11 books of translations, most recently an Audible Blue, Selected Poems 1963 to 2016 by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist, you know his name, Klaus Merz, and it won the 2023 Massachusetts Book Prize for Translated Literature. His own work has been translated into many languages, including, are we ready, Japanese, Chinese, Russian, French, Italian, Romanian, Greek, German, and Icelandic. He is currently working on a novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincennes is editor and publisher of the incredible Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing and Spoke. He has lived all over the world. Regulars join in from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but now lives on a farm in rural western Massachusetts, overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, Melville's inspiration for Moby Dick, where there are still more, and here we go, it changes every week, people, spotted lanternflies, bald-faced hornets, and double-striped dragon hunters than bipedal hominids. Mark, it must be great to live in rural Massachusetts.
It is. It is. But here's maybe kind of a little call to arms to the environment, to whom it may concern. On such days when, in their opinion, the sun lay low on the beaches, the coastline rumbled and bubbled and broiled, and for a short minute, the langoustines could be finger-plucked well done from steamy waters. It was then the heavens bowled over, doubled in upon themselves, and in a last-ditch attempt, a lone woodpecker touched the earth with a soft kiss. Someone tiptoed by with their dirty laundry and said, "There are dead fish simply everywhere." And, well, now I'm delighted to say a little about David Shapiro, who, as I said, unfortunately can't be with us tonight. David's a brilliant poet who obviously epitomized the New York second school second generation. He's widely considered a prodigy, having published his first poem at the age of 10 in the Antioch Review. He also played violin and performed with symphonies beginning at the age of 11. David is the author of 20 books of verse, and he's known as much for his genius wit as his generous ways. His honors include awards from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. David is a master of what he has described as collage imagism. And obviously some of the people everyone who's reading tonight is going to read one or two of David's poems as well. But before we get to that, we hear from Brenda Coultas, who in the 90s moved to New York City to work as staff at the Poetry Project. Her books include The Marvelous Bones of Time, I love that title, and A Handmade Museum from Coffee House Press. And Brenda's more recent works, both from Wesleyan University Press, include The Tatters, An Elegy to Print, and The Writing of an Hour, an Ars Poetica in 2022. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I'm so happy that I could be here to honor David. I have so many fond memories of David playing the violin and reading at the Poetry Project. And so David, I shout out to you. And I'm going to read a poem by David from the, I believe it's a New York Anthology of Poets. This is from 1963. It's a very early work. And it's called Four Stories. 1, The Children of Scotland. Once children in Scotland contracted the throbbing foot disease of horses. Formerly only cutthroats and ruffians were infested. But in weaving a metallic prickle around a think plant from end to end of Scotland, the germ twisted. This character was frustrated. This one had dirty thumbs. This one was closed, suffocated, throttled. Finally, he picked his way open at both ends. The purebred animals crossed the wood in the thundery evening. 2, walking. Mike went walking and finally cut grooves one day in the Milky Way. I supplied him with the occasion, October. At the raffle, he sold her undies and the straight bar with teeth on its edge. What could make it clearer? In psychoanalysis, this process is known as the duplicating process. Breathe in, a large thrush eats the mistletoe. 3, water collects. Jerry was a human being of superhuman size. He laughed in a suppressed way, liable to hump out of the brighter part of greater than a semicircle. Australia trusted him to give a serious, dull present. He succeeded in coming meaningless. 4 Georges, then only semi-transparent speech and mildness. Gunya. I'm heating up this stone for your toy. Water collects, and then the writer's name appears on the saucer. A fine gift. Number 4, girl in her teens. I love a faithless telephone pole blown out by a storm. I was frightened into singing. Singing is saving. I called up your state. It tears them where it can. You are the best. From David Shapiro. There's a loud chorus of birds behind me. So I don't know if you could hear them. They're having a great time. So I'll read from some of my work. Animals. Animals know by smell. She has fur in the right places. She caused a candle to burn in the window to beckon in nosy passers-by. The Mona Lisa she put in a teacup, shiny and painted beside the candle. The teacup of Mona steams, black as tea, cup of Lisa strained by a child's brown velvet jacket. A blue of bees. You remove her face and another face appears and smells like oranges. You remove her face and another one appears and tastes like milk. When you stood up, it became clear that bees are not made of wood, but of earth. 2, you are not the doll's painted face. You are not a face inside of another's face. You are a beehive dripping in honey and wax, and you may be a queen. 3, once upon a time, there was a girl trapped inside an iron maiden with only a bee as a confidant. A bee who is a secret keeper, a bee of noble heart, a bee of kindly touch, but without a key. They dwelled until they dwelt no more and left upon this earth mortal coils inside a corset of steel and honey. Unwritten. Not a fiction, although I have told some tall tales. Not an essay, for I have no argument. Not a memoir, for I've already said it all. Not a suicide note, for I wish to live. Not a farewell message, for this is not goodbye. Not a message in a bottle, for I'm not lost at sea. Not a poem, for I'm out of beauty. Not a to-do list, for I'm kept awake by all that I have left undone and unsaid. I took in particles through spiked nose, droplets of narrative ran down the back of throat and flooded guts with a ponderous arc, and with a lion's paw in lap. I turn off news and undo. In the bronze chair on the edge of jungle and beach, I ponder the arc and flood, hippos, sheep, and giraffes 2 by 2. Consider the manatee as a snout rises up for air. How many days in close quarters? Did Noah smell like horse sweat or hay? More than one flood made this world. I ponder enormously how wicked we were when the earth shook us off. Cave. My soul lowered by a thread into a cold lake inside a flooded mine shaft 5 stories down. It felt like a color, not a sensation of temperature. If it were a color, it was chartreuse. I called for a UFO to show itself, and it presented as a plasma screen in the sky. A sensation like inhabiting a sealed can of wet and plastered grape leaves. It felt like moonlight inside a paint can. Please keep a lid on it, lest it evaporate, lest it dissolve, like cave paintings destroyed by human breath. That day, I felt a handprint on the inside. It felt like bruised ribs. Bald eagles. Hot tissue paper in the wind like a flag was raised from the dirt, and the flag of dirt had powerful feathers. At first, it was like ice skating into a watery hole beneath the dirty flag roosting on serpent's arms. That feeling lasted all day. My forehead felt useless and hard, like a turquoise ring locked inside a vault. Drawing. I began to draw long lines like hoarfrost on a pencil tip, and my fist felt like a hand grenade, like writing on sandpaper, and like melting my fingerprints on ice. My neighbor's boots are a rough tongue on carpeting, while our doors bounced slightly. It felt like the time a man offered to tell me a Viking saga. Was he speaking in code? It felt like sleeping under a silver mylar blanket on a bed of pine needles in the open. Sex. Afterwards, my thighs and ass felt strong and wild like the dappled horse buttocks inside a Leonora Carrington painting. Riding in a new car. Riding in a new car is like climbing the devil's tower. The car tastes like luxury coffee, and exiting through the passenger side like shopping with credit cards of platinum. We ride and talk, trying to catch a glimpse of the devil's nest. It's like returning to a beehive, but of human voices, and it stings to be near language. Noise. Circrillian white or like library books on loan. I felt unable to fit my noises into a handkerchief, withheld sneezing and avoided catnip, like an arm slipped and bounced down on spinning vinyl, like forks and knives cause cosmic disturbances. The silence of that hour hung in the air, a glass ornament. Western landscapes. My neighbor's voice spoke about the surface management of a common mammal, and the place names tasted bittersweet. It seemed as if a map engraved itself on my back, and every visible rut became a ballad of local disasters, and monuments erupted from the memory of my spleen or other organ meats. There was a house occupied by white settlers. This house was made of wood and hewn from a single log. And the last poem, Flying Over Snow. Near a small city, the snow became brown, and fear wove a weighted blanket of blood inside my mouth. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thanks.
Much appreciated. And of course, now I'm going to introduce one of our co-hosts, Jeffrey Cyphers-Wright. Let me just see. I think there was something that David Shapiro said about him that I probably should mention. Yes. In fact, David wrote on Jeffrey's Triple Crown Sonnets, his book. He said Jeffrey's work is dazzling, befuddling, up and down, and impossible to crown, though he writes in the impossible form of the shattered corona. His work is full of good humor, but it is also a wildly rumbling as the elephant in the morning. As archaeologists find new skulls, so Wright discovers impossible anamorphosis of poetry. The work seems to me out of Ted Berrigan's sonnet sequences, then suddenly it seems to veer into possible sequences, a globalism which is the point. Not to like these works is like rejecting New Orleans because it is full of pleasure. Everything seems to be packed in here, even oneself. But the self that you discover is strange and seems like nothing you had guessed yourself before. We have just stepped on Mars by mechanics. Wright has been there for a long time by human means and refused to clean up. Between the mess and the message, and the messer and the mismatch, there he lies. David Shapiro. Jeff, up over to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Oh, thank you, Mark, for putting this together now in its 5th year. And I wanted to read a poem that I took an epigraph from David. The poem is called Mind Your Business. And the epigraph is, the astronauts were weeping. Together, we've singed night's black wing. Together, we've wrecked the train. Too many of us, blue drag, smokestack hurricanes, Futile fuses for the few. We, unresigned poets, shovel love letters into the furnaces. Keep the motor running, hot foot, skipping over damaged section. All the hubbub will you nothing buy. Hubba hubba. Mug the sun, steal the light. Let dragons lick your burning tears. Stop global warming, campfire girl. That's your job now, what you're here for. And I wanted to read briefly, I didn't know, my main acquaintances with David was like when he was on Facebook. And for a few years, he was on Facebook and he was just so brilliant. He called Facebook some kind of an Olympian chorus. And he, it just showed his brilliance was like all over the place. So I asked him if I could publish these two poems that he had just posted on Facebook as if he was just, writing to his friends. And the first one is called Cloud. Silence the messenger. Hands off him. Hands off the cloud man like Boris Pasternak, whom they say even Stalin was scared of. Hands off the teacher like Tolstoy, my teacher. You have a lot of explaining to do. Leave him for 2 or 3 lives. But they say, no, this one already had 2 lives. And it gives me a great pleasure to read this one before, and it's part of this, because it's dedicated to KK. Kenneth Koch, who was his dear friend, and Saba for KK. I used to have a wonderful teacher. He changed the marks of blind students. He had an extreme taste for good taste. I see him on your lack of a balcony. He wanted the balcony for you, too. I see him on his motorcycle meme and playing ping pong. He always won. And we wanted him to win. And he told the students they could win, too. And just thinking of him makes me lean into a doorway and say, goodbye, Kenneth. You were in good shape for a cloud in pants. And that, of course, harkens back to Mayakovsky's poem, Cloud in Trousers. And so, moving along now, I'd like to introduce Joanna, who suggested that we get David. And I'm so glad she did. I mean, the timing was actually exquisite, Joanna. And
well, I
I'm
wish
so
it was
glad.
when he was well enough to read, though.
Well, yes, I mean, if had we done it a week ago, true, but I mean, we tried, we got close. So anyway, so let me just introduce Joanna Fuhrman, who I've known and admired for a long time for her style and her books and her dedication to the craft. She's an assistant teaching professor in creative writing at Rutgers University and has been for a long time. She's the author of 7 books of poetry, including To a New Era, Hanging Loose, 2021, and the forthcoming Dada Mind, Curbstone, Northwestern University Press. Just want to mention, though, about Hanging Loose Press, Joanna's been there since she was a high school kid, and she was dear friends with Bob Hirschon, and had a lot to do with that magazine still. And also another book is forthcoming, Data Mine, from Curbstone Northwestern University Press. Fuhrman's poems have appeared in Best American Poetry 2023. Shout out to Elaine over there. And the Pushcart Prize Anthology, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, and the Slowdown Podcast. She first published, here it is, with Hanging Loose as a teenager, almost as young as David Shapiro, and became a co-editor in 2022. It's a pleasure to bring Joanna Fuhrman. Yay.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to set my timer because I don't know how long I'm going to talk for and how much time I'm going to have to read poems. But I woke up this morning with this line of David's in my head, which is, blessed is the school. And I think I was thinking about that because I was feeling the opposite. Like I had to write an email to people because my university wants to make the class size bigger. So we're fighting that. But then I was thinking, blessed is the school means something different than the institution, right? So this is a section of the book, of the poem Burning Interior, A Burning Interior, which is the title poem of this book. And there are many sections. So this is just one of the sections. It's called A Prayer for a House. And it's dedicated to John Haydick, who was David's good friend and he also was the head of the architecture school at Cooper Union. And I was going to talk a little bit about watching David teach, because I visited his class at Cooper Union, and also I went with him once. I was like homeschooling a girl, and he was teaching students in Central Park when the gates were up. So we, like, me and the kid went there, and it was really great. Anyway, so this is called Prayer for a House. Blessed is the architect of the removed structures. Blessed is the structure that weathers in spring snow like lies. Blessed is the crystal that leaps out of the matrix like a fool. And blessed is the school. Blessed factures, blessed like spring snow, blessed like a fool and a burnt book. Is the school a structure or weather, or a lie like spring snow? And is the matrix leaping also like a fool? And is the book built or burnt? Blessed is the removal. Blessed too the inlay like spring. Blessed is the tiger of the matrix like a found fool. And blessed the unbuilt like a book. Blessed is the architect who survives all removal. Blessed is the trapped structure like a gift. Blessed is the crystal fool, and blessed is the school. Blessed is the cut and the cry. Blessed the body of the patient in spring snow like lies. Blessed is the crystal stepping out of the matrix like a fool, and blessed is a burning book. Blessed is the anchorite and the architect in the dark smudge. Blessed is the remover bending to remove. Blessed is the folly leaping out of matrix, and blessed is the empty center. Blessed burning structures, blessed like snowy spring, blessed cry, blessed in the matrix like a cut fool, and blessed each unlit book. Blessed is the architect of the removed cut. Blessed is the structure that weather in lies like spring snow. Blessed is the crystal that leaps out of the matrix like a fool, and blessed is the school like a burning library. Old school, old new prayer, old new song. Blessed is the crystal and the cry and the matrix like a painting fool, and blessed is the school. So I remember when I visited him at Cooper Union, it was a poetry class, but they were all like architecture students. So they came in with these amazing books that they made, each one kind of more amazing than the next. And then when I was with him, when we went to see the gates in Central Park, we were walking by it, and he was, just sort of free associating. And I just remember him saying, "Oh, you know what these remind me of? These the orange gates." He was like, "It reminds me of Aaron Soroyan's poem, Crickets." It's just the same thing over and over again. And then he started, saying like crickets. And, the poem was just crickets, 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 crickets. It just went on and on. And then you'd think he was going to stop, and then he just kept going. All right, so I'm going to read some of my own poems. So I'm just going to read some prose poems from this book of prose poems about the internet that's coming out. Here we go. Okay, so I think I'll start with this poem because I like Brenda's poem about aliens. The poems about the internet, but a lot of the poems are about, not a lot, a section of the poems are about movies, because on the internet, everything is still sort of current, but not current. So this is called Close Encounters of the 21st Kind. When the cursor blinks, when it appears and disappears, do I too disappear? Do I collapse into another universe where the edges of sharp objects bleed into music? Is the feeling of falling into a beloved's arms forgotten? Or have I just substituted one mode of sensation for another? The way connecting our brains with filaments replaced the landline, or the way chatter replaces silence if one spends too much time alone. It's possible that each night when I put my sleep apnea mask on and unscrew the light bulbs from the fixtures, is not the claws of the 20th century I hear scurrying through the ceiling, but a future version of myself. Does this virgin still need weekly sex and poppy seed flagels with locks? Is she happy just being a sort of antimatter matter? A circle with a big nose strapped to it? A screen with a pair of Groucho mustache glasses? A pillow? If beds are more comfortable when repurposed as satellites circling the moon, when the aliens supersede us, will we mind? I've heard everyone's teeth look better surrounded by green. Okay, another one. This one is called My American Name is Money. Strangers ask how you feel about terror, but when you hear tell her, you wonder, who is this her? And why is she getting all the attention? This is a problem with coalition building. You think you are holding hands with another, but it's actually an empty rubber glove. Shapiro was right about the song of love. Cruelty makes more sense when you're looking at an empty piazza than a bustling square. In the algorithmic state, the town square is a cage where we think we are having sex until we wake up and find we are thumb wrestling a robot ghost. Understand. I didn't grow up in this pixelscape. I don't know how to remake my face into the face one recognizes in the mirror. Do you still remember how it felt to share a boysenberry milkshake in the back of a truck? Have you ever felt real seafoam on another person's thinning hair? You know, I was a person once with actual wet boots. Back then, I only gurgled like proto-data when it rained. I always read this poem and I was like, I'm not going to read it, but I think I will read it. Okay, it's called Poetica Fondant. And it sort of references the internet phenomenon of cakes that look like real objects. Okay. I baked a cake in the shape of a moon, and no one could tell what was a cake and what was the moon. When I cut it open, it tasted like overly sweetened watermelon tea and smelled like the shadow of the leaves on a lake. I loved it. But then the bloggers arrived, complaining that my baking was bougie. So I crafted a cake in the shape of my face. It had curly hair, glasses, and an open mouth that could keep talking even when no one was listening. In my big marble cake nose, I hid my people's struggles, the escape from the pogroms and the years of overly salty chicken. I loved that cake too, but was ashamed to admit it. I'd read that identity politics was just the cream filling of neoliberalism. So I baked a cake that was messy, like New York. I cut it open and rode the subway inside, eating my way through dirty, glistening sidewalks like a hungry Frank O'Hara. But that was the year everyone claimed to be Frank O'Hara, even those numbskulls who hated modern art. So I baked a cake shaped like the internet. And when I cut it open, everyone who tasted it said it tasted just like the internet. And I kept eating it and eating it and eating it in a kind of durational performance until the cake itself was the internet. And I, myself, the somewhat delicious crumbs. I think I have time for a super short one. I'll read one more. This is called Outrage Fatigue. A songbird's idea of refusal quavered, gunking up reality with music. The sky adewed the end times with memories of future blood. my appetite or yours, hun, said no one to nothing. Misled by lopsided horse clouds, the window was declared the new expanse. Office parties smelling of last century drifted in and dispersed. Life became a series of toes, recalibrating the atmosphere through boredom and smoke. Still, fear battered the dust mites awake. What used to be my country raptured the horizon's teeth. Ecstatic options sprinkling emotions in the mix. Hastening the return of reality is 89.3% dream. Thank you.
All right, Joanna Fuhrman. That was brilliant, huh? Wow, what texture. We talked about that. You're amazing. You're like going to Mars. The Mars was a planet of poetry. Brilliant. Thank you, Joanna Fuhrman, so much. So Kate Farrell's going to read after this. I'm going to introduce Mark first. And I've known Mark a long time. He used to write for my magazine. We had a lot of fun together. I wanted to mention a couple of things. He had a recent chapbook in Spanish and English that Jordan Davis published, Chiquitanas. And he also had translated a lot. And one book I wanted to mention from Lavender Ink. Mark's worked a lot with Bill Lavender down in New Orleans. And this book is the translations of Jose Maria Hinojosa, which you really need to check out. That was University of New Orleans Press, actually. And then he also did from Grove Press. He did the Lorca's Poet in New York. And he's been published in a lot of magazines, including Hanging Loose and Live Mag, New American Writing, Tin House, Ping Pong. And he's also received awards from the NEA and the National Writers Project. And he's down in Oaxaca. And I was going to say, since he invited us all down, I think what we need to do is like, we'll all vote in the chat of what day we want to go there. And we'll all go together and make it more fun, right? Please welcome my good friend, Dog. Pero, take it away, Mark Statman.
Wow. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, Cassandra and Jonathan, Joanna, Brenda, Kate, everybody who's here, people who love David, people who might not know David. Hi, Catherine. Catherine Koch is here someplace. I thought I saw her before. There she is. Smile at everyone here. There she is waving. So Joanna said something about watching David teach. I watched David teach. When I was a student of his at Columbia in my sophomore year, the first semester of my sophomore year, I took David's rather loved Keats course. And in it, essentially, we were supposed to read John Keats, right? We were going to spend the semester reading John Keats, which we did. And except that if you know David and you get to know him well, you know that David is one of those people who sees like all cultural, literary, intellectual history all as a piece. He doesn't need to sort of like divide things out. He just sees everything connected. Everything is. And when I was his student in this Keats course, which was in 1977, that was what the course was about. David would start reading Endymion, and in the middle of a line, he would just stop and say, "This reminds me of an article in the New Yorker last week by Hannah Arendt," and he'd just go off on that. And I was this 19-year-old, and I didn't know anything in the world, and so I would write down everything like Hannah Arendt, the New Yorker, Meyer Shapiro, and I would go off and find out who these people were. This is pre-internet days, so I was spending a lot of time in the library, a lot of time in bookstores, a lot of time at magazine stands, because David he just saw everything as a big piece, and that sort of way of seeing the world and being so excited by it was one of the like for this kid from Long Island, it was like an oasis, it was just the most extraordinary, beautiful thing. So I took this Keats class with David, and David at the end of the semester, David gave us this, final paper assignment, and I had no idea what to do with it. I just didn't know what to do. And so I took an incomplete in the class, which in those days, like when I was a professor, I retired from 31 years of teaching in 2016. If you got an incomplete, it turned into an F if you didn't do the work, right? All you professors there, no, they fail. But in those days, they didn't. You just took an incomplete. You didn't get credit for the class, but it didn't affect your grade point. So I had this incomplete. I then became friendly with David over the course of the next 2.5 years. David was always so supportive of younger poets, even if they were undergraduates. He was just really there for us in so many different ways. And so I became friends. We became friends. Along with, I think Joseph Leese is here, and Joseph and I were studying with David around the same time, and became friends, good friends with him around that time. And so with at the end of my senior year of school, I thought, I might go to graduate school one day. And if I do, it'll be in literature. And I haven't taken any literature classes except this one class with David, and I took some writing classes with Kenneth Koch. And so I called David up and said, David, remember I took your Keats class and I should get a grade. So what should we do? And he said, well, sit down at the typewriter and type everything you know spend an hour, write everything you know about the great odes. I can do that. And he said, so when do I have to get the grade in by? And I said, well, tomorrow. And he said, Mark, start typing. So I did. I typed for an hour. I ran up to the apartment. He's in Lindsay's apartment on Riverside Drive. And I, went up the elevator, gave David the paper, chatted for a second with Lindsay, and then went home and called David up the next day. And I said, David, how'd I do in the class? He said, Mark, I gave you an A-. I said, David, you gave me an A-? I hadn't gotten an A- on a paper in years. He said, Mark, it was 2.5 years late. This poem that I'm going to read by David's from his beautiful In Memory of an Angel, which came out with City Lights in 2017, is called The Full Goofy for Joanna Fuhrman. That's why I've chosen it. I love this poem though. First, Goofy was lost in a circle, unsure, a demi-mondaine in a middle muddle. Then garlands surrounded him like a horse with no kisses and thriving on petals. When the sticky snakes ganged up on him, they bit him as though he were a benzene ring, dreaming of thinking. After all, he was paralyzed in the gigantic rotating multi-clock in the nursery where the black holes are born. Yeah. I love David, and I can't wait for him. I was so excited to be reading this. It would have only been the second time I think that we had ever read together, maybe the third. But so I'm going to read some poems which will be in my new book, which is coming out in next year, 2025. It's called Volverse Volver. Volverse is to return, or rather is to become. Volver is to return. It's a little bit like Teshuvah, if you know that concept. And what it does is it sort of completes two of my previous books, a kind of Mexican trilogy that I started when we moved to Mexico in 2016. The first book is called Exile Home, and the second book is called Hechizo. And Exile Home is kind of the yang to which is the light to the yin of the darkness of Hechizo. And what Volverse Volver, and I try to do, what I hope I do is I kind of deepen the relationship between the two books and what I started out to explore in them. So here we go. Mistakes. It said Mar Egeo, and I read ego, as if the Aegean really needed my help. Who has time for life anymore? The busyness of nothing becoming my big business? Maybe the ocean is bottomless, horizon unending, sky infinite. None of this is true. I think of money in pockets of the women on the street, of the woman on the street who could be 10 years older than me, 10 years younger. I tried to give her 5 pesos, and if I miss a day, 10. And when we've been out in the country a lot, I drop her a 50. Her response is always the same, a nod of her head, her fist squeezes tightly whatever I've put there. I'm measuring decades in minutes these days, and the hours left bathed in the yellows and golds of late afternoon sun. We had empanadas for lunch, maybe pasta for dinner. This oyster world of mine is missing a few pieces. Maybe it is what they're saying. Mercury in my sun and my moon. This has nothing to do with baseball or flipping calendars on a big screen. I see snow falling, leaves falling, a stone in a well, the circles of water, a mirror for calm. I wonder if that's what's being asked for, calm, tranquility, a lazy sun. Our dogs take up the afternoon floor, heavy sleep. It's all that matters, that and the fans, this unusual heat. Desperation has me resenting too many things, the teachers' union, bad grammar, the politics of my other country. One Zen koan after another passes. Then there's the dogs. The younger puppy wants to sleep. The older wants to play. How many reversals will my world allow? The morning gods say infinity. The twilight gods say over. I'm thinking a lot about nations and place. I'm in the process of completing my citizenship. I'll be a dual national, a Mexican citizen and a US citizen. And so I've been thinking about what that means to have so many places. Birthplace. The craziness of thinking I know something about exodus or liberation. Slavery is genetic, the scientists write, meaning we carry in ourselves the slaveries lived by all those on whose shoulders we stand. What does it mean to sing, let my people go, or sing, please, please release me? To sing the rancheras of a country where I'm not native. Todos vuelven goes the song, todos se vuelven goes the heart. What's on my lips this morning? A prayer, milk, tea, the morning sunlight strikes western mountains. We carry slaveries into freedom, carry liberation, our shields on fire. God doesn't tell us to burn down our homes, but there they are, consumed, consuming. We throw straw, alcohol, mud, throw lead and pain. I remember that song, John Barleycorn, who must and never dies. A drink, not the answer either. A breath, a wind, the morning. Good morning, and clothes on the clothesline. Sun and the light that ends those oppressions. They must die, we've carried them so long. Naked like a sword, in 3 days my mom is dead. And my mom died in 2022. And this poem is going to appear in this year's New American Writing. Naked like a sword, in 3 days my mom is dead. Naked to the world or hidden in a cane, a sheath, or naked, naked like my mother in terminal restlessness, wanting her clothes off, now all the time, wanting to know, is she well, not well, knowing she knows that her end is closer than winter, closer than fall, this horrid Arizona heat, no fall, no winter, just a blaze, sun, thick air, even at night, the desert won't release us into life. She has visions, my father, he's here in the room by her bed. My father can't say, won't, if it's time, though he knows. We all know there is no mom, no mom, no mom there anymore. His ghostly present, absence enough. We know he's waiting to take her in his arms. He hasn't been able 4 years. The angels don't have to say enough. My father doesn't say enough. I ask him if he's wanting this. He says, you've loved her on earth and you'll love her still. And one day it'll come that it becomes your time and we'll be there. 2 more poems, shorter. Bread, earth, fire, wine. What to do with a wind the size of a house? The fan spins overhead, swaying hammock and cicadas, birds. What's temptation without a scorecard, blessing, curse, the spiders of time, lizards, their drama. Here come the forget-me-nots, a rage for disorder, a pale view of sky, a love of moon. Time collapses into Chinese lanterns, welcome mats, jujitsu, semaphores. I want to matter on a matter scale, elemental tables set with candles and roses. The air fills with hammer, shotgun, grasp of nopales, meet horizon. The sun leaves me clueless, eclipses roosters without effect. The night geckos sing, warm the cool air. What else takes flight in the rain? Airplanes, moths. There's a bird in that tree finding sap and dust, a piece of some other puzzle solved, like a hummingbird, a hurricane. Bookends. Every gate in the storm is worth setting up at. We enter life with confidence, bravery, grace, and the future with our hearts spilling over into fields, into streets, over mountains and town squares. I don't like living in cities anymore, or maybe I mean need, the way once upon a time milk or booze. The internet is a tool, a pen, a hammer, sand, and paper dragons. The sky is soft with slow and slower cloud light. I watch shadows a lot, the safekeeping of scorpions, bees, fireflies. We all point that away. knowing where the time went, the music went. Someone wrote to me to say how tired they were of politics on earth. I thought of the politics of heaven and hell, the politics of the sun, Mars, the moon, Venus, the stars, Jupiter, the cigadas, cicadas, chanting all morning for sex, bodies in song on fire, the times of year longing rules like January until December.
Mark, that was amazing, huh? God, it's good to hear you. It's good to see Catherine too. And on this special day to have you, all of these people so tied up with David and Kenneth, and and
So
they're
amazing. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. All right, our next reader, Mark, is ready for us here.
Oh, totally. Well, thanks so much, Mark. Great to see you again. You look really kind of vibrant and full of spirit. So that's great to see, man.
And those were beautiful. Beautiful.
But next I'm gonna introduce Kate Farrell, who has joined us at the last minute. Kate's 7 books include 2 co-authored with Kenneth Koch, Sleeping on the Wing, an anthology of modern poetry with essays on reading and writing, a poetry handbook widely used in high school and college classrooms, and Talking to the Sun, an illustrated anthology of poetry for young people, a teaching anthology illustrated by works from the Metropolitan Museum. Kate was also Kenneth Koch's writing assistant for 12 years. She was taught at Columbia University and in the New York State Poets in the Schools program, and she acted for a decade with the literature-oriented New York Art Theater. Her work has appeared in numerous journals and several editions of Best Spiritual Writing and Visiting Night at the Academy of Longing. A collection of hers was also published by Lavender Ink. Kate is the editor of a new book of prose by David Shapiro, You Are the You, Writings and Interviews on Poetry, Art, and the New York School, due out from Mad Hat Press in September. Welcome, Kate.
You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I got it.
Great.
I wonder if I can still talk.
You can.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll start by reading some poems of my own, then afterwards say a few words about David Shapiro's new book of prose, due out from Mad Hat. The first poem is a prose poem that arrived in a dream. Philosophical Sonata. I was notified in a dream that my solitary studies, of which few knew and nothing much had ever come, had earned me an honorary degree in a little-known branch of philosophy. The degree would be conferred at a nearby university on such and such a date. They hoped I could be present. Arriving at the ceremony at the appointed time, I found my mother, much to my surprise, already on stage, seated at the piano. She announced that in lieu of a speech in my honor, she would perform her rendition of a book I loved, a volume at the very heart and soul of my studies. As she began to play, I was amazed that a book, any book, could function as a musical score, but even more astounded that the long, arduous, mysterious opus that had come to mean so much to me, 100 books in one, a lifetime of grappling, was so lucidly expressed by the wondrous sonata my mother played that night. After the applause abated, she laughingly told the audience that she'd learned to play the book simply by dying, whereas for her daughter, and here she gestured toward me, it was a lifelong métier. Not till then did it hit me that this might be the very idea I'd been waiting for. Nothing, of course, on the order of Martha Argerich performing Rachmaninoff at Lugano. No, this would be something else entirely. In taking the stage, I thanked our host for bringing us all together for this wonderful occasion, then sat down at the piano and began to play. To a certain bird. Deep down, we want the birds in our meadows and forests to be our pets, or at least for one or two of them to be, if not a pet exactly, a creature as wild, responsible, and free as we ourselves would like to be, but with magical dimensions, the kind of bird friend, for instance, who shows up in a dream to explain to us our mission, or returns from unmappable ends of the earth, sojourns and volitions to land on a nearby table or stand unseen in leafy arbors, listen hard, take pity and tweet, flap its wings and sing its songs, console us with its company, if less like the dog at our feet than like the star unaccountably permitted to glitter at the window of our rickety human universe, as if a perspective existed where our vast mistakes were understood, even forgiven. Like that poem by Stevens, where he finds the merciful solace of a motherly touch in the fleeting lightness and loss of a night wind in August. This next poem is called The Costume, and it recounts the time I went to a costume party dressed as Wallace Stevens' poem, The Idea of Order at Key West. The Costume. I once went to a costume party dressed as Wallace Stevens' poem, The Idea of Order at Key West, a plan that arose in my local Salvation Army thrift store at the sight of a translucent dusk blue silk chiffon dress, a floor-length 30s era garment. It hung lightly from the sales rack with a matching opaque slip and a hand-pinned price tag of $3.99. Back in my apartment, I wrote the lines of the poem, or as many as would fit, with invisible glue on the dress, front and back, neckline to hem. When sprinkled with glitter, the words came into view, glistening like the surf that washed the twilight seashore where the woman in the poem walked along singing. The costume party was loud and crowded. "Who are you dressed as?" a guest would shout above the clamor. "The idea of order at Key West," I'd yell back. A lark in part, but the real inducement was to wear the blue hair of a poem I loved, and something of the glimmer of its darkening port, the atmosphere of its ruminations, its state of mind and sense of the world. It was also the most beautiful thing I ever wore. Even so, I was almost not sorry to pick it up at the cleaners a few days after the party and find that every speck of glue and glitter, every word and line was gone, as at the end of the poem, after the song is over and the spellbound listeners head back to town, past the boats, glassy portals, and stars in the water. The coast once more, a night blue swath of wind and surf and thrift shop chiffon, a mystery with a price tag in a Cornell box. This next little poem, entitled Metaphysics, is another dream poem. Metaphysics. For a while after he died, my father didn't seem to discern dream visitors, but I was amazed nonetheless to witness his swift and serene rejuvenation. From time to time, I found him dining outdoors in beautiful locales, a multicolored grain on his plate I'd never seen elsewhere. Yes, laughed the server. It's a staple here, a sort of national dish, I guess, like potatoes in Ireland, pasta in Italy, couscous in Morocco, rice in Japan or Madagascar. We can't get enough of it. And it's remarkably nutritious. What's it called? I asked. She answered, metaphysics. Back now to David's upcoming book of prose. The title is You Are the You, Writings and Interviews About Poetry, Art, and the New York School. It has a wonderful foreword by David Lehman, is edited by me, and is due out in September from Mad Hat Press. When we began this project, the idea was to bring together a compellingly various selection from David's 5 prolific decades of prose, interspersed with interviews and a few poems on poetics. Now, 7 years later, David Lehman has remarked in his foreword that You Are the You amounts to a, quote, masterclass in the aesthetics of the New York School and the avant-garde in general. I'd add, for those who don't know David's prose, that the writing itself is brilliant and exciting and has David's trademark mix of erudition, artistry, candor, verve, and great freshness of thought and language. A violin prodigy as a child, David decided at 10 to be a poet. I love the story of how he set about reading every book in the Newark Public Library. He kept falling in love with new poets, he says, without giving up earlier ones. A different poet, he tells Joanna Fuhrman in an interview, would be a different universe. This outsized love for poetry and poets became with time the wonderfully wide-minded, New York School-inflected, pluralist perspective that suffuses David's writing and helps make them so very worth reading. Much more to say, but I'll leave it at that and end with David's poem, You Are the You, the poem from which we took our title. The T in the is capitalized, by the way. You are the you, the only one. You are the you. You are the you in this poem, mon amour. Harrisburg, mon amour. Boats break. So-and-so asked me, to whom does the you in your poem refer? I said, are you feeling well, so-and-so? I can't believe I said it. So sue me. I said, it's the beloved so-and-so. Oh, is that all? Well, I said, she wouldn't think it was so little. To look up into your face is like looking into the devastated stars. Lights of all kinds I traced. You, and you, and you, and you. You are the you in this poem, mon amour. Boats break. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Wonderful reading.
Thank you.
And of course, thank you, all of you. Thank you, David, for your inspiration for all these wonderful poets who are following your voice in some way. Thank you, Brenda, of course, for joining us. Joanna, Mark from Oaxaca, and Kate, thank you for stepping in and telling everybody about this new project that's just about to be released. And thank you for such a wonderful reading.
And, you know, Lindsay was watching, so David was with us. I don't know if you noticed, but it was really...
I saw her. Yeah, that's so cool.
That's great. And of course, he can also watch it later In the meantime, I think tonight I'm going to hand over the open mic to Cassandra. Would that work?
Indeed, yeah.
Cassandra.
Absolutely. So I also have an introduction. So we have a new co-host. We have a techie. He has been protecting us from Zoom bombers for quite a long time now. So we thought we would make it official and read John Wesseck's bio. He does always open the open, so it's a good way to begin. John Wesseck is the regional editor of the San Diego Poetry Annual. He's published hundreds of poems and stories in journals such as the Atlanta Review, Berkeley Fiction Review, I-70 Review, Lowestoft Chronicle, New Verse News, Patterson Literary Review, Pearl, Perini's Fountain, Slipstream, Space and Time, and Underside Stories. His most recent books are The Shaman in the Library and The Prague Deception, and you can find him on johnwesseck.com. So John, what have you got for us today?
Well, I have a poem for you today. The hole in the sky swells of cumulus part because this is no hour for ordinary miracles. As the moon nibbles our star, the orange sunset overhead pours otherworldly light on street, lawn, and deck chairs. The moon covers more, until God's miracle, totality. Crickets sing, an onyx set in burst of white gold hangs in the sky like an alien spacecraft with propulsion beyond human understanding. Protective glasses cover eyes again. Goddess Sun, also known as Amaterasu, Omikami, Wariu Pranili, Shapash, Atanua, Chupkamui, or simply photons squeezed by gravity from a ball of hydrogen, reemerges wearing her rarest jewel, a fingernail sliver of ruby. August 21st, 2017, total eclipse, Columbia, South Carolina, and I look forward to reading this poem again on Lit Balm in 2044.
I love it. There's kind of a bit of a romantic John Wesseck with moon nibbling the stars and the photons squeezed by gravity. I'm loving it. Thank you so much. Next, we have Lydia, who is going to read. She has read for us before. We love her work. So Lydia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. This has been a wonderful afternoon of wonderful poets, really exceptional, I think. What they did yesterday. Lena fell, so needed 2 stitches above her left eye, and also she broke her left wrist, but didn't need casting. I lay on the futon the entire day without feeling anything, without stretching or swelling or thinning, without remorse. Mark went shopping for groceries for the week, but we couldn't find any sriracha, gandules, yautía, or mofongo. Wrong neighborhood. Karen worked on her dissertation for hours that had been due 2 weeks ago and 17 days. Joe didn't leave the nursing home for 3 days and got cozy with his new roommate. Stella called Stanley, begging him to return. Then she yelled out his name repeatedly, gruffly, and lustily. Mary had her last name changed back to her maiden name when her ex warned her not to soil his name or the children. Christian learned 2 new facts that he could use against Bob and 1 piece of misinformation about his wife that might work anyway. Dick went out and bought a dictionary on sale, but the A's were missing and some of the Z's. The twins got into a down and dirty brawl and one lost an eye, but people couldn't figure out which one. Rosemary Henya, who had osteopenia, decided to quit teaching, wearing miniskirts, watching Minions, and peeling onions. Susie Q looked into adopting new kids because the other ones were done, underdone, cooked, or overdone. John Paul paused outside the church and crossed himself, even though he wasn't high Catholic or even low Anglican. Mark Anthony decided to marry his fourth 19-year-old girlfriend in a row and have his 8th kid. Tilly was thrilled to find out she was an aunt again, though she had no siblings. Marilyn decided to leave the country, but couldn't decide which one. Teresa contemplated murdering her mother-in-law, but thought she'd think about the details in the morning, like Scarlett, when her head was clearer. Thank you.
That was amazing. I love the wordplay in that so much. So many people were smiling at how witty that was. And your earrings are magnificent as well.
Thank you.
But the stellar moment, I believe, given that New Orleans Poetry Festival is coming up, I would have loved to go there. I believe they have a stellar yelling competition down the street. So Mark, I'm relying on you to enter on our behalf after that one. Thank you so much, Lydia. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
DeWitt needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. He's one of our faves, and he has a novel coming out any second, plus about 42 other projects on the boil that will come out probably in the next few months as well. Who knows with DeWitt? DeWitt, what do you got?
Well, from the backlist of Mad Hat, Sweet Joram, this is a prose poem, I would now say, called On Conscience. The again bite of inwit, Richard Roll of Hampole called it, prick of conscience, voice of God within, internal wisdom. Tolstoy saw most people seeking to silence it with tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs. See, why do men stupefy themselves? We speak of social conscience, of artistic conscience. Joyce ends his portrait of the artist to Stephen Dedalus's vow to forge the uncreated conscience of my race. I love the witty dismissal by Shakespeare's second murderer, the hitman, in Richard III. It beggars any man that keeps it. It is turned out of towns and cities for a dangerous thing, and every man that means to live well endeavors to trust to himself and live without it. Its legacy is shame. The worm of conscience still begnaw thy soul. Oh, shame, where is thy blush? Jiminy Cricket to Pinocchio. Yep, the world's full of temptations. They're the wrong things that seem right at the time, but sometimes the wrong things may be right at the wrong time or vice versa. Understand? Clear conscience, troubled, weighing on, strong, weak, stirrings of, haunted by. Tim O'Brien, I felt guilty for my conscience. Abraham proceeds to sacrifice Isaac. Freud called it superego. Inherent, learned, think psychopaths and sociopaths. How could a teenager mow down children at Sandy Hook? The motiveless malignity. Beyond good and evil, writes Nietzsche. Banality of evil, says Hannah Arendt. Rebel conscience, says Camus. Saint Chenet, the criminal, says Sartre. Wired for righteousness. Suicide bombers, kamikaze. Animals have instincts. In humans, conscience overrules instinct, or tries to. 10 Commandments, 613 mitzvah, sharia, taboos, acts, persons, things, words, nemesis. Embarrassed by thanks for our spontaneous generosity, we say, pass it on. Or some of us do. Sometimes.
You gotta love him. He's one of our faves. He has all the internal wisdom, social conscience, and artistic conscience that we need. And there is his magnificent book, one of my favorites. And now going into doing voices too to it. We're going to expect multiple voices across all your poems. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. May, we have you next. You always do incredible things with your poems. We're excited to hear what you've got for us today.
Okay. A poem titled Entanglement. In physics, there's the idea of entangled particles, and they can be great distances apart. And if you do something to one of them, that'll have effects on the other particle, no matter how far away it is. So entanglement. It's a beautiful day, and there are two people, looks like a husband and a wife, hiking up a trail visible from the restaurant deck. A couple clouds blow around on the breeze. The sun's hot, and our beers are cold. The wife suddenly sits down on what might be a rock, but the husband doesn't notice and keeps trudging on. Why do you guys always do that? I say to my husband, and he says, do what? And I point up the slope and say, leave the woman behind and just keep forging on. He looks for a bit and shrugs and says, maybe she told him she'll be fine. I say, maybe she says that because she doesn't want to be a bother. Maybe she should stop thinking he can read her mind. The woman bends over and rubs an ankle. Maybe you guys should be more considerate. Maybe you wives should be more truthful. The husband has turned around and come back and is talking to his wife. I think sometimes you wish I weren't along. How's that for truth? The woman lifts her hands to her husband and he helps her to her feet. Honey, I always want you along. And who's not being truthful now? The couple resume their hike. We glare at each other. The sun ducks behind a cloud and the temperature drops.
Love it. Oh my goodness. And you are John Wessex dream because he's our physics poet as well. So I could see that this is going to be a wonderful thing. We should have a whole open on physics poetry. Thank you so much. I loved that. And we finish our open mic with our Devilsome duo, Cindy and Bob. So Badass Brooklyn, where are you? What are you reading for us?
Well, I'm going to read something special tonight. It happens to be from the beautiful anthology Alcatraz, which was edited by our own Cassandra Atherton. It was beautifully illustrated, each poem illustrated by Phil Day. To have my poem in here. It's a prose poem like all the poems in this anthology. And it was published here. Jonathan Penton published it in Unlike kind of poem. And it's called Surrealist Convergence. But what about bewilderment and the bewildered? The chance, the stormy, gray, late afternoon, immaculate light meeting the garbage can alley, my electric mouth kissing aubergine ecstasy, the world going on and on, even through these. Not, it was written before the pandemic and Trump.
I love that poem and your electric mouth. I love all of it. I love it. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we're going to close out open mic the way we always do, because there is no open without Bob ending the open. So Bob, from his kitchen laureate, as he's now known, what have you got for us? Something to take away for the rest of our evenings, or like me, morning, although I'll probably go back to bed after this. But what will I dream about, Bob?
We'll see. This is actually a poem that's included in my upcoming collection from Quale Press called Washing the Wings of the Angels. Information. They did not know yet if the man in pajamas would be the killer or the killed. The train schedule said the next stop would be Wolf's Head and not Sheep Dip as announced. The weapon used had to be something unexpected, like a corkscrew or a noun. When the woman spoke, all the adjectives gathered around her to listen. She was subject to the usual rules of usage, but somehow she twisted them to her own advantage.
That's the way you end an open. No one does it quite like Bob. I think I'm going to be dreaming of adjectives. Maybe it will be a nightmare. Mark, back to you.
Thank you.
Well, what a wowzer of a show. I mean, once again, I have to thank all of you for such a fantastic show. Mark, Brenda, Joanna, David, Jeffrey, of course, and thank you, Kate, for joining us as well. And also let you know, we're taking a little break. We have the New Orleans Poetry Festival coming up next weekend, which I believe one or two of you I saw in the audience will be joining. And so we won't be back till May 4th. But on May 4th, we feature Kimiko Han, Vijay Shajadri, and Kirk Glazer. So please join us for that. And, well, to close off,
let's give a shout out before we do. Let's just give a shout out to all the peeps here, like Kenny Angel there. Kenny, wait for us, babe. And David Blanchard. Look at this. And where's Peter Boshager still here? And Bill Considine. Just a quick shout out. We saw Martine Bellin. So many great people today. Lydia Cortez. You know, all right, Mark, take it away.
Well, Martine, of course, we'll see you next weekend. This poem, just to end, is called Ring of Fire. Don't forget, one mother said to her stubborn daughter, don't revert to the mental time travel you got so used to in your youth. Who doesn't need to know about their past? Some said. Who doesn't live by time running on a clock? Had often been said. Can we all sit together at the same spiritual table? The priest was once to have intoned. Psycho-emotionally, you are reacting to a cosmic perspective, was once explained as what that meant. Otherwise, once, everything seemed impossible. Thank you, everybody, for a wonderful night. I'm sure I'm going to see several of you sometime soon. But otherwise, see you May 4th at Lit Balm, and lots of love, poetry. Have a fantastic night, weekend, wherever you are. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you, everybody.